In October 1995, NASCAR's Igloo Sportsman Challenge was preparing for one of their biggest events of the year, the Winston 100 at Charlotte. This series was brought to life by Humpy Wheeler, and it was supposed to be a stepping stone for regional short track racers to get experience on speedways before making a jump to the ARCA, ASA, or Busch North Series. However, at this race, there would be one accident that was so brutal that it led Humpy to discontinue the series. Today, we're going to talk about the life and tragedy of Russell Phillips. In 1989, Humpy Wheeler organized a series dedicated to giving local short track drivers a chance to show off their skills and gain experience on the big tracks. In its first season, every single race was held at Charlotte. Over the next couple of years, tracks like Richmond, Pocono, and New Hampshire were added to the schedule, but Charlotte would still host the majority of the races. The series ran old Busch and Winston Cup cars, but they were tuned where they typically ran laps averaging 155 miles per hour. This is about 30 miles per hour slower than the Winston Cup series ran at the time, but these were very inexperienced drivers. There was a lot of criticism from the industry and fans alike about the safety of the sport. Organizing races for a bunch of kids or older guys with no experience on big tracks is just asking for disaster. Think of the ARCA series today, but with even less experienced drivers, less safety technology, racing on some of the biggest and fastest tracks in racing. Not to mention the smallest of budgets, and the series was full of drivers eager to take a stab to become a big-time racer. It didn't take long for the first fatality in the series. On May 16, 1990, 27-year-old David Gaines came to rest after being involved in a multi-car crash. Steve McEachern, an off-road racer, came off turn 4 at full speed and plowed into the rear of Gaines's car. Steve flipped wildly into the infield, while Gaines succumbed to his injuries by the time he arrived to the hospital. The next year, Ed Gartner Jr. went for a spin during a May race at Charlotte and cracked his sternum and fractured a leg after another driver T-boned him. This other driver, Tom Deeth, suffered a broken neck. Tom was a very well-known hydroplane racer and champion. Like Steve McEachern, Tom had a very different racing background and was looking to take a stab at NASCAR through this new series. One of the most infamous moments of the entire NASCAR Sportsman division happened. Philip Ross lost control of his car exiting turn 4 and backed into a guardrail opening on pit road. The car burst into flames, but Ross managed to escape. He suffered a neck injury as well as second-degree burns over his body. The series' second fatality in 1992 was a crushing one, as it was Gary Batson who tragically lost his life. Gary collided with Neil Connell, resulting in his car turning on its side and riding along the wall. Gary was pinned between the wall and Neil's car as both cars came to rest. As they stopped, a massive fire erupted, and due to the awkward positioning of the cars, Gary was unable to escape and burned for more than a minute. Second and third degree burns covered more than 80% of his body, causing him to pass the next morning. The crashes were mounting, and with each passing incident, the series received more and more criticism. 2 fatalities in a couple of years for a series that ran only a handful of times each year was not a good look at all, and quite frankly unacceptable. Nothing was changed in terms of safety or who was allowed in the races. There are rumors and stories that the Sportsman Division officials let quite literally anyone with a car into the race. Despite the danger, many determined drivers still competed knowing this may be their only shot at a career in racing. One of these drivers was Russell Phillips, a young 26-year-old Charlotte native. Phillips grew up in Mint Hill, a suburb right outside of Charlotte, and lived in the area his entire life. Russell was a race fan from an early age, and by his adult years started running some races at a local short track. Aside from being a racer, he was a detailer and fabricator for his family's truck shop, a volunteer firefighter, and a youth minister at a local church. Racing went through Russell's veins, as he also taught at Charlotte's Fast Track Driving School and even met his wife at Concord Speedway. At this time, Phillips was on course to have a career in NASCAR, whether it was in driving or not. In 1995, he found himself and his brother on the pit crew for Jeff Purvis and Phoenix Racing in both Cup and Busch Series races. James Finch and the team actually helped prepare a car for Russell's 1995 Charlotte events. Russell was making a name for himself, as he had raced nearly all of the Sportsman races at Charlotte and was getting better every time out. In the division's first trip to Charlotte that year, Russell sat on the pole for the first time in his career. Russell led the first couple laps of the race, but started to drop through the pack quickly. But this was still a success for Phillips. He had only raced 16 times previously and had a best finish of 8th. He settled into the back half of the top 10, but he was holding his own. The brightest day of the young man's career would come to a screeching halt on lap 17. Joe Gaeta and Morris Bice came together off turn 4 and spun towards the entrance of the pit lane. It was a pretty routine spin until Stephen Howard took avoiding action of the spin. He drastically turned right, coming directly into the path of Phillips. Phillips' car rammed to the rear of Howard's car, sending him into the catch fence root first. The top of his car was ripped off instantly and was completely destroyed. Russell Phillips, at only 26 years old, died instantly. The scene of the crash was brutal. The first responders were on the scene in seconds, and they knew that Russell was dead. Russell's body had been horrifyingly mutilated during the crash. The side of the crash was so bad that the first person on the scene waved others away. At this point, I'm going to touch on some very disturbing details of the scene, so if you are in any way squeamish or sensitive to this kind of stuff, I recommend you skipping ahead. Officials and spectators had a horrible sight after the crash. As Russell's car slid across the catch fence, a caution light tore through his windshield. Russell was dismembered in the wreck, with his right arm stuck in the catch fence. Most shockingly, Russell's head was found in his helmet at the entrance of pit road. It was undoubtedly the most gruesome crash scene in the history of NASCAR. After the crash, Humpy Wheeler had this to say: "It was a freak deal caused by the angle he got hit. If it had happened to any kind of race car, it would have been the same." Humpy went on to call it a terrible accident, but wouldn't end the race. The race continued after a 40-minute red flag. Morris Bice, who had spun out in Phillips's crash, said, "This is a great series, but they need to govern the kind of experience guys have. You have to run flat out here. You have to use your smarts. These younger drivers are trying to make a name for themselves. They want to move up onto the Busch Series. They're not willing to take their time." Despite the race continuing on, the race was recorded but was not broadcasted out of respect for Russell. However, this crash had a massive impact on the future of the series. Charlotte and Humpy Wheeler would pull out of the Igloo Sportsman division. After that fatality, despite the freak nature of it, we just thought we needed to move on. Pocono, Richmond, and all the other big tracks pulled out as well. The series wasn't technically over, as they ran 5 races in 1996, but they were all on short tracks. That kinda defeated the whole point of the series though, so the series officially folded at the end of 1996. Russell Phillips was a young 26-year-old who had his entire life ahead of him. He had a wife and was close with his family and local church. He reportedly had 3 volunteer jobs, giving back to the community in many ways. Russell was the type of driver who was easy to root for, especially for the Charlotte crowd. Like many other drivers, he was trying to live out his dream, and he saw the Igloo Sportsman division as his chance. Tragically, on the day he had his strongest performance in a race car, he lost his life. He was taken far too soon and will never be forgotten. Anyways guys, that's it for this video. I hope you did enjoy it or find it interesting. So if you did, make sure you leave a like, subscribe so you never miss a video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.